Welcome back to the ASUG News Studio. I'm Courtney Bjorlin. I'm one of the editors on asugnews.com. I'm thrilled to be joined by a different segment to bring into the studio today. We talk a lot about IT topics in here, but these are business applications, so we really need to bring in the business angle here. Very, very excited to be joined by two executives from SAP's HR department. I have with me today David Swanson. He's the Senior Vice President of HR for SAP, and Brigette McInnis-Day. She is the Vice President of HR for SAP. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity.
So today we want to talk a little bit about how HR can get into the role of being viewed as a partner to the business. Impact versus action is what we're going to talk about today.
Sure.
So how do you decide what to measure first in terms of bringing that to the business to be a reality?
I think if you look at the history of HR, what we've done is we've measured a lot of activity. Number of people hired, number of people who went through leadership training, number of people who completed compliance, performance reviews done. And really what we should have been thinking about was the impact of those, not the action. So the fact that we hired 100 people last quarter is interesting, but did those 100 people become productive faster than the 100 people we hired the quarter before? The fact that we sent leaders through leadership training is interesting, but did they become better leaders? Do they have better retention rates, higher employee engagement, more stickiness? Are their people being promoted faster than the other managers? So it's really the idea of impact on the business, not just the activity, that I think really makes the difference and can make HR a true business partner.
Brigette, how do you position HR in that way to have a seat at the table?
One of the things that we talk about is having a seat at the table. I think that at SAP we do. It's about making sure you're in the right meetings, and even if you're not invited, you get to the meetings, right? And really the point is you have to know the business. If you're there just to push HR programs, that's not linkage with the business. If you understand the business and understand what the business needs are, what the business objectives are, it completely is synergistic in terms of understanding the needs of the people, because that's our business. It's about the people, right? And how do we actually drive that for the business? And that's the linkage. And you need to know the business. You need to be there and be accurate. And you need to be able to run with the business. You say the word partner, but I think it's really about how it's one of the key elements of driving the business.
Driving the business. I like that. I like that a lot. So how do you decide what to measure? You're looking at everything and all these different areas. How do you decide what's going to be the most impactful for the business?
Well, I think you have to start with what's the business strategy. So are you trying to drive innovation? And so therefore, what spurs innovation? Is it, it's in the people that you hire, it's in how you lead people, it's how you have the work site set up to enable collaboration. So really, I think understanding first what's the business strategy. So example, I support the technology and innovation organization at SAP. And a big part of our agenda is innovation. So we've done a lot of work with exploring different work sites. We've sent people off to independent locations, we call them app houses, to really help enable their innovation out of the kind of, the overall umbrella of SAP, which tends to kind of slow things down at times, being a 65,000 person organization. If the strategy is execution, as it is in the sales organization, then you need people who can move quickly, who can think fast and move fast.
Yeah, some of the needs are different. So every time you make changes to the business or there's changes externally in the marketplace, the skills needed, the talent you're looking for, and how you develop them is different. So that changes. That's the beauty of being, I think, sometimes in HR is that you can flex with what the needs are. It's not cookie cutter programs that you're going to push out. It's based on here's the skills we can bring to the table and how we leverage and drive with the business, but it's also what's the need? What are the changes in the marketplace, and how do we get our people to be more agile to do that? And we can help them do that in terms of how we tweak that and drive that. But the strategy is always changing in terms of, I shouldn't say the strategy changes, but the overall direction's there. How we approach it and drive the enablement is always different.
So what are some of the things for your team that you're measuring? Where have you seen progress?
A couple things. We look at our overall net promoter score for HR. Would you recommend our services to someone else, if it was a consulting firm, whatever it may be? That's one of the big indicators of whether or not we're actually driving the right messages. So are we building the programs that are needed by the people and the leaders, and making sure that once they're delivered, are we getting that feedback loop and getting the information back to say, this has met the need, here's why not, and continuing that process. It's a co-collaboration with the people. That's important versus back office, building out programs and pushing them out, because then you miss the mark.
And I think for our leaders, so there's this idea that Lars Dalgaard talked about last year here at Sapphire, this idea of hiring, or a manager's batting average. So in U.S. baseball terms, if you can get successfully up to the plate and hit the ball 3 times, you're an all-star. If you think about a leader and their success rate is 3 out of 10, that's a failure. So what do you start looking at? You start looking at how long do people stay that manager hires. Are they people who are staying 3, 4, 5 years, or are they leaving in 6 months? Are the people who are being hired by that manager getting promoted faster? Does that manager have higher engagement scores than other managers do? So you really start to assess the impact of what that manager's doing, not just the activity that they happen to be filling requisitions in 30 days or less.
Right. Another big piece there, I think those are KPIs, and you can look at those. Another thing is leadership accountability. Do I just deflect on my problems up to my higher level management? Do I deflect my issues to finance, operations, HR, or do I take leadership accountability? You can see the journey of a leader and how they've taken that journey and how they're growing and how they actually make decisions. And that's where they actually leverage HR differently. And that growth is something you can see with a leader. If they see HR as not an enabler, you can tell where they are on their journey. And that's very, very key in terms of your overall development as a stronger, more senior leader in an organization. It's a very different approach in how they engage HR.
That's really interesting, Bridget. The other thing that I really like that you both addressed was that this can be so different for sales, for the technology, I don't know the full name, Vishal's team.
Right.
You know, and do you ever come together from the different teams and collaborate on what's working well in sales, what's working well in technology?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So there's going to be differences, but there's probably some core needs that are similar. So if we meet the core needs that are similar and designed it, and then the execution or the rollout or the packaging might be a little bit different, but the core essence might be the same. And then we need a line, because then you have a kind of a bit of a core look and feel underneath for SAP, for our people, but then at the same time, how and when it's delivered for development versus sales would be different. Right. And then that tweak is what they need for that individuality that's very high on our culture. So I think that's how we do it to align and get a bit of a standardization underneath, but how we drive it is the difference.
It's definitely worth mentioning, too, that SAP is really consistently ranked as having very high employee satisfaction and you know, tons of industry-related surveys. And the turnover must be pretty low for a company with a culture like that.
It's about half of the average of our peers.
Yeah. I mean, that's remarkable. It really is. So let's talk about the software that you're using to measure all these things. You're using SAP software, of course.
Yes, so he's waiting for me. So definitely one of the new things for Success Maps with our acquisition with SuccessFactors has been a big launch in terms of how do we move the focus off of just the technology and what we're doing as a process to how do we manage talent end to end. And looking at how do we assess each person as a talent and develop them differently is completely different. And having a tool that actually our system that can drive that talent end to end is a completely different conversation you're having with a leader. I have a lot of global leaders that sit and they need to know their people around the world and how they manage that workforce. They can do that now. We can build succession plans that talk to talent plans, that talk to objectives, and it's linked. That's something that's going to really drive a very different discussion and impact. The impact's very different when you know who your people are, you know how to develop them, and you know when they're ready for the next move. That's very different, and I think that's the lift up from a SuccessFactors perspective for us.
The Employee Central, which is the technology that the cloud's deploying for HCM, the difference is that the prior software we used, you had to learn how to use the software and then work your practice around that. The beauty of Employee Central is it thinks and works like you would think about as a person leading a group of people. And so the software, to Bridget's point, enables the conversation, doesn't get in the way of the conversation. And it's really meant to be an opportunity to keep a record, but then also to be able to interactively go in and out during the year.
So to close out our interview, and this has been a really interesting discussion for me, definitely, leave me with one piece of advice for really making HR a business partner.
Well, for me, it's know your business. Know how your company makes money, know who the customers are, and know who the competition is. If you don't know that, then you're just coming up with interesting HR programs that may or may not have an impact.
And a message to leaders, too, I think, is see HR as an enabler and a partner, not as someone that you need to, it's not going to help you strive ahead. And take that leadership journey and really reflect on yourself, too, to say, how am I leveraging all the key business leaders that I need to make myself successful, make SAP successful, because you need to work across every function to make it work at SAP.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks.
So thank you for joining us for this segment of ASUG News, and stay tuned. We've got more great shows coming.